I thought I had locked the door. The words hung in my head, sharp and sudden. As I turned to see Silas standing in the doorway, his hand frozen on the doorknob. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room was bathed in the warm glow of late afternoon sunlight filtering through the blinds, but the tension cut through like a cold blade. I had moved into this house 4 years ago, marrying Morgan after what felt like a whirlwind romance. Morgan was everything I thought I needed: steady, reliable, and safe. He brought with him his son, Silas, who was 19 at the time and already navigating the rough waters of adulthood. He had inherited Morgan's sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes, but there was an aloofness about him that set him apart, a quiet distance that felt more like a wall than a window. Our relationship had been cordial but unremarkable. Silas spent most of his time at university or locked away in his room, headphones clamped over his ears as if to block out the world, or maybe just me. We rarely shared more than a few words at dinner, and I'd resigned myself to being just Dad's husband, not a parental figure in any real sense. But something shifted when he came back home for the summer. At first, it was subtle, offhand comments about my cooking, or the way he'd linger in the kitchen after everyone else had left the table. He started asking me about my work, which he'd never shown any interest in before. "It must be exhausting dealing with clients all day," he'd said one evening, his tone laced with a surprising empathy. It was flattering, if a little unexpected. Morgan was often preoccupied with his demanding job, and our conversations had dwindled to routine exchanges about bills and schedules. Silas's newfound attentiveness felt like sunlight through a crack in a shuttered window, unbidden but not unwelcome. That afternoon, I had been in a rush, preparing for an evening dinner party Morgan had insisted we host. I'd come home late from work, tossed my briefcase onto the couch, and headed upstairs to change into something more formal. I hadn't even thought about locking the door. After all, Morgan was still at work, and Silas rarely came into our room. The wardrobe door creaked as I pulled it open, rifling through shirts and jackets. I had just shrugged out of my work shirt when I heard the faint click of the bedroom door opening. And now, there he was, standing in the doorway, his face a mixture of surprise and something I couldn't quite place. "Silas," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I grabbed the nearest shirt and held it against my chest, as if the fabric could shield me from the intensity of his gaze. "What are you doing here?" He blinked, his hand dropping from the doorknob. "Sorry," he said quickly, but he didn't move. "I didn't think you'd be home yet. I needed to borrow a charger." I gestured toward the nightstand, where an extra charger coiled neatly beside the lamp. "Take it and close the door," I said, my tone more clipped than I felt. But he didn't move right away. Instead, his eyes flickered across the room, lingering for just a moment too long on the undone buttons of my shirt. Heat crept up my neck, and I turned away, fumbling to put on the shirt I'd grabbed. "I'll get it later," he mumbled, finally stepping back. The door clicked shut behind him, but the air in the room remained thick, as if he'd left something behind. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. It was an innocent mistake, I told myself, but the way he looked at me, that was harder to dismiss. As I buttoned my shirt, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My face was flushed, my hands trembling slightly. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was nothing. A moment of awkwardness, that's all. But the way my heart raced told me otherwise. And as the evening stretched ahead, I couldn't help but wonder. Was it just an innocent mistake, or had something shifted between us that couldn't be undone? I avoided Silas for the rest of the evening, but it wasn't as easy as I'd hoped. The dinner party Morgan had planned was small, just a few close friends gathered around the dining table, but Silas's presence loomed large. He sat directly across from me, his eyes meeting mine far too often for comfort. Every glance felt like an unspoken challenge, a quiet reminder of the earlier encounter. I tried to focus on the conversation, nodding along to Morgan's anecdotes and politely laughing at his friends' jokes, but my thoughts kept circling back to Silas. After the guests left and the clinking of dishes in the sink had faded, I found myself lingering in the kitchen, wiping down an already clean counter. Morgan had gone upstairs, muttering something about an early meeting, leaving Silas and me alone. "You've been quiet tonight," Silas said, his voice breaking the silence. I froze for a moment, then turned to face him. He stood at the edge of the room, leaning casually against the doorframe. His tone was light, almost teasing, but there was something else beneath it, a weight that felt dangerous. "Just tired," I replied, forcing a smile. "Long day." He nodded, though his gaze didn't waver. "About earlier?" I tensed, gripping the edge of the counter. "What about it?" Silas stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate. "I didn't mean to walk in on you. I should have knocked." "It's fine," I said quickly, though the words felt rushed, brittle. It was nothing, but even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. It wasn't nothing. Not the way he had looked at me, not the way my pulse quickened now under his steady gaze. "You seem upset," he said softly, his voice low and measured. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. The word felt inadequate, too small to encompass the swirling mess of emotions inside me. I searched his face for any sign of mockery or insincerity, but all I saw was a strange kind of earnestness, as if he genuinely cared. "I appreciate that," I said, my voice quieter now, "but let's just forget about it. Okay?" He nodded, but the intensity in his eyes didn't fade. "Sure," he said, though his tone suggested he wouldn't. The conversation should have ended there. I should have walked past him, gone upstairs and locked myself in my bedroom. But instead, I stayed rooted to the spot, my heart hammering in my chest. "Silas," I said after a long pause, my voice more uncertain than I intended, "is there something you're not saying?" His lips quirked into a faint smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "What do you think I'm not saying?" The question hung between us, heavy and charged. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The tension between us felt almost tangible, like a live wire crackling in the air. He took another step closer, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of his cologne, something woodsy and sharp. "You're overthinking this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Am I?" I asked, though my throat felt tight, my breathing shallow. His smile widened slightly, though it still carried that same edge of mystery. "Maybe." The sound of footsteps on the stairs broke the moment like glass shattering. We both turned toward the noise, and a second later, Morgan appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "You two still up?" Morgan asked, his voice groggy. Silas stepped back instantly, his casual demeanor slipping back into place as easily as a mask. "Just grabbing some water," he said, holding up the glass in his hand. Morgan gave a sleepy nod, his gaze briefly sweeping over me before heading back upstairs. "Don't stay up too late." When Morgan was out of earshot, Silas turned back to me, his expression unreadable. "Good night," he said, his voice neutral now, almost dismissive. "Good night," I replied, though the word felt hollow. He left the kitchen without another glance, and I finally exhaled, the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding rushing out in a shaky gasp. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty doorway, my mind racing. Was I imagining it, or had there been something in his eyes, in his tone, that suggested he wanted me to question everything I thought I knew about us? And if I wasn't imagining it, what was I going to do about it? The days that followed were marked by a fragile tension that hung in the air, unspoken but impossible to ignore. I couldn't shake the memory of Silas's lingering gaze, the charged undertone of his words. Every interaction with him felt like walking a tightrope, careful not to tip too far into the abyss. Morgan, oblivious to the undercurrents rippling through the household, carried on as usual. He was busy, as always, juggling work and social obligations. I found myself studying him at odd moments, wondering if he could sense the shift in me. Guilt gnawed at the edges of my mind, a persistent ache that refused to fade. Silas, for his part, acted as though nothing had happened. If there was a change in him, it was so subtle that I couldn't be sure if I was imagining it. He still offered those quiet smiles, those fleeting glances that lingered just a second too long. But he didn't press, didn't push. It was as if he was waiting for what I couldn't tell. One evening, I found myself alone in the living room, the glow of the television casting flickering shadows across the walls. Morgan had gone to bed early, and Silas was upstairs. The silence of the house felt oppressive, a weight pressing down on my chest. I thought back to that moment in the kitchen, the way Silas had stood so close, his words carrying a meaning that went beyond their surface. I had tried to convince myself it was all in my head, that I was reading too much into a simple mistake, an innocent exchange. But the memory refused to be dismissed, replaying itself in my mind like a film on loop. I was still lost in thought when Silas appeared at the edge of the room, his presence startling me out of my reverie. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, his voice low. I shook my head, gesturing to the couch. "Just needed some time to unwind." He nodded, stepping into the room. "Mind if I join you?" My heart thudded in my chest, but I forced a casual shrug. "Sure." He sat down on the opposite end of the couch, keeping a respectable distance. But the space between us felt electric, charged with unspoken words. For a while, we sat in silence, the low hum of the television the only sound. Finally, he broke the quiet. "I've been thinking about what you said, about forgetting what happened." My stomach tightened, and I turned to face him. "Silas, we don't need to talk about this." "Maybe we do," he countered, his tone steady but firm. "I don't think it's as simple as just pretending nothing happened." His words sent a ripple of panic through me. "It was nothing," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "You walked into the wrong room at the wrong time. That's all." "Is it?" he asked, his eyes locking onto mine. There was no malice in his expression, only a quiet intensity that made it hard to look away. I stood abruptly, putting more space between us. "This conversation is over, Silas." He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched me with that same steady gaze. For a moment, I thought he might press further, but then he nodded, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." The sincerity in his voice took me off guard, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Finally, I managed a nod. "It's fine. Just, let's move on." Silas stood, his movements unhurried. He paused in the doorway, glancing back at me. "Good night," he said, his tone neutral but his eyes lingering. "Good night," I replied, my voice quieter now. When he was gone, I sank back onto the couch, my mind racing. The truth was, I didn't know how to move on. Not from this, not from the questions it had stirred in me. Questions about my marriage, about myself, about the boundaries I had always thought were unshakable. The days ahead would demand answers, but for now, all I could do was sit in the quiet, grappling with the weight of a moment that had changed everything.